Hey guys, welcome to another video from Henry's Untitled Tutoring. This video is for anyone who wants to learn how to easily install Linux on a laptop or desktop, or who may want to check out running their own Linux server. All you need for this is a spare computer and a USB drive. As always, please like, subscribe, and click that wonderful bell if you like this kind of content so you can see more of my videos in the future. The first thing we'll do is to head to the rufus.ie website, where we can download a copy of their software to create a bootable USB stick. We'll just hit save here on this Rufus 3.9 version, and that'll download it to our system. The next thing we'll do is to go to the ubuntu.com website. Now, I recommend people start with Ubuntu as their first version of Linux because it's very easy to use. There's lots of great support out there for it, and you'll find that it's very compatible out of the box with most systems. So if you go over to download here, you can see there's a desktop version and there's a server version. At the time of this video, 18.04 LTS is the version I recommend going with. So once you pull this down, you can open up your Rufus software here, and it's going to prompt you. Windows will probably say this is not a trusted software vendor. Just say yes or accept that it is. And then you'll be able to choose what USB drive you want to write this to. If there's more than one drive here, you may want to just make sure before you run the software, like close it, and unplug any extra drives that you have, just so you don't accidentally overwrite anything you care about. Because if you have a drive in there you have information on that you care for, you may easily destroy it by overwriting it with a copy of this actual version of Linux. So as long as you're happy with this, press select over here. This will let you choose the version of Linux you want to install, the ISO file you downloaded from the Ubuntu website, for instance, and press open. You'll see that the boot selection will update, as will the volume label. At this point, you can press start. When you do this, if this is the first time you've used Rufus, it will probably prompt you regarding the version of syslinux. Just hit yes. It's just telling you that the version of syslinux it came with isn't compatible with the copy of Linux you're trying to install, and it'll be downloading the appropriate one for you. After that, you're going to see this prompt, where it will ask you what kind of mode you want to write in. You want to use the ISO mode for compatibility here. Just press OK. And the last thing it'll prompt you for is to make sure you're OK with destroying all the data on this USB drive. Just press OK there and it'll proceed to write to the drive. Once it's done, you'll have a bootable USB stick that you can use to install Linux with. Stay tuned for more, as we're going to go through the installation process of a Ubuntu server next. Okay, so welcome back. We're just doing the server installation process for the Linux server version of Ubuntu. We're doing this using a virtual machine in this case. If you have your own virtual machine lab, you'd be doing something similar. If you have a physical computer, you'd be also doing something very similar. Instead, you'd just be inserting a USB stick with that copy of the Ubuntu server version on it to your machine that you want to install to, and going through this process. If you have a physical machine to do this with for your first time, it's probably much more easier to learn that way, but you can also do this with like an installation of VirtualBox or some other virtualization software. In my case, I'm using something called Proxmox. Once the system boots up, you're going to be presented with a prompt asking you what language you want to use. You can select English most likely and just continue with that. It'll then ask if you want to update the installer that installs Ubuntu, which you probably don't need to do. You can just hit continue. And then to select a default keyboard layout. US English is probably fine for most people. Next is to pick an IP address to use. This is where you'll need to do a little bit of research. Check on your local network's router and see if you can find what the DHCP address pool is, or what the range of IPs that would be handed out addresses for when a computer comes online, your network that's using DHCP. Once you know what that range is, you can go and try and select an IP address to use that falls outside of that range. So in my case, I will do a trick here on my console. I'm going to do a ping to 192.168.2.21. This is an address that I believe is free, and I'm going to confirm that. So first off, I don't see any ping responses, so I can hit Control-C and break out of it. That's fine. Then I'll check to see if there was an ARP entry for that IP address, or basically a binding to a physical Ethernet address. which there is not. So that tells me I'm free to proceed. If you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure that all the machines that you would usually have online on your network are on at this time, as that can help to determine if there is going to be an address conflict. You really want to avoid that because it'll just cause annoyances and strange behaviors for your machines that do have a conflicting address. So we'll go into the manual configuration for our IS interface adapter here, and we'll assign it a subnet of 192.168.2.0/24 and an address of 2.21, then a gateway of 192.168.2.1. This information you should be able to determine from your router, like the default gateway, for instance, and the actual network address and size, or by looking at the output of an ipconfig command on your Windows machine if that's what you're starting at. Then your name servers. You can either just use one, or you can put in a comma and use two or more. And a search domain. This isn't required, but I'm going to put in the lab as my search domain. And we'll save those changes and tab down and go to done. It'll ask about a proxy address. We don't really need to specify a proxy at this stage, so we'll hit done. A mirror address. It'll detect the nearest Ubuntu mirror for you to use. In my case, I have one that's located in Canada, so I'll just go to done there. Oops. There we are, done. And now it'll ask about the file system, so how it wants to set up the disk, basically, or disks, to store information. Probably you only have one hard disk in this machine, which will make this easier, as you won't have to worry about identifying which drive it is you're installing to. But if you hit enter here on use an entire disk, it will present you with any disks it finds. In my case, we have one 32 gig hard disk. It's a virtual disk. I'll hit enter there to select that as my file system to use. And you can see now it's going to create a new mount point for root, or / with the size of 31.997 gigabytes and a type of ext4. That's the formatting of the disk. And that's all fine. That's what we want to see. So we'll just go to done. And then we will confirm by going to continue that we want to proceed and potentially destroy information on that existing disk. It'll ask you now for some personal information for your profile, so we'll put in our name, I'll put in our server's name, and then we'll put in our username, followed by our password of choice, and it will check to make sure that they match, so if they don't, it'll warn you, and then done. Now it's going to ask about installing SSH. This is something you definitely want to do, as most of your administration, if not all of it, will probably be through SSH. So we'll enable that and just go to done. Then it's going to ask if you want to install any additional software snaps. These are like the pages that like Ubuntu comes with, but a little different. You probably don't need to even bother with any of these. Any of the stuff here you can always install later afterwards anyways, so make sure you actually need it first before you go turning things on at random in here. And just go to done. And it will now proceed with the installation process, which will take some time, so feel free to go have a little break, get a coffee. We'll skip over towards to the end of this process and continue the video then. Alright, so we're back now. The installation process has completed. You can go through the installation log if you like and see what happened, or if you're not super curious, just hit reboot and reload the system so it can come on up and you can start using it, which we'll do here. So what we'll be doing is we'll be accessing this via SSH. So you're going to want to go and get yourself a SSH client to use. If you're on Windows, I would recommend checking out the PuTTY software page, which is nice and simple and straightforward. It's free, of course, as well, so I would suggest checking out putty.org. You can download a copy of it there, and we can use that to connect to our system. So let's watch the boot process here, make sure it all looks good. It'll take it a moment just to boot up and generate its first SSH keys, which just happened and flew past the screen for us, and then eventually we'll see a prompt. And at this point the system is ready for us to log in. So we could either log in locally here, or we can go over to a separate prompt, which we'll do here, and we'll log into this guy using our SSH command. We'll use our username at, and then the IP address of the machine. And it'll prompt us to accept this new fingerprint, which we will, provide our password, and it should log us in. At this point, you can notice that there is a bunch of information here, and it's telling us that there's 22 pages that we can update, so we should run that basically. It will automatically run any security updates, so if there's any pages that are vulnerable to attack, it will update those for you during the installation process, which you may have noticed. So one thing we'll do then is we'll run sudo apt update. Sudo is like the, command to get to the administrative privilege mode in Linux, or in like this version of Linux at least, in any version of Debian and many other versions of Linux. You can also use su in some cases, just su. We'll provide our password. It will then go out and retrieve any update information it can, and tell us that we can list out what pages we can upgrade using the apt list command with the upgradable argument. And then we can see here we've got a bunch of different things we can upgrade. So we'll just do that. We'll just do sudo again and apt upgrade. Can do a -y as well, so it just goes and does it for us. Otherwise it'll prompt you for a yes or a no. And off it goes to update itself. So at this point we've got a system, it's updating. After this we'll be fully ready for us to use and do what we like with. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, make sure you like and subscribe, and again click that little bell, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Take care.